Most people know Cliff Robertson as the actor who won the Academy Award for Charlie in 1968. The aviation community knows something different. They know he owned a D-Day combat veteran Spitfire, bought it in 1963, and kept it flying for over 3 decades. They know he organized clandestine night flights into a blockaded war zone in Africa, at low level, in the dark, under anti-aircraft fire, using 4-engine cargo planes from World War II. They know he was flying his twin-engine aircraft directly above the World Trade Center at 7,500 feet, at the exact moment the first plane hit on September 11th, 2001. And they know that when it comes to the aircraft that is the most extraordinary story in this entire collection, most people who know Cliff Robertson's name have never heard of it. We are starting with number 6 and working toward number 1, and number 1 is going to completely change what you thought you knew about who this man was. Stay with us, subscribe right now, and turn on notifications. This is the kind of aviation history that most channels will never cover. Let us start. At number 6. The Belgian aerobatic biplane, so rare that fewer than 35 were built before the war shut the factory down. The Stampe SV4 was designed in the early 1930s by George Ivanov for a Belgian firm that specialized in advanced aerobatic trainers. It looks like a Tiger Moth from a distance. It is not a Tiger Moth, where the Tiger Moth is a gentle, honest biplane designed for primary training. The SV4 is a machine built around the specific demands of aerobatic competition, ailerons on both the upper and lower wings for a significantly higher roll rate than single aileron designs, a fuel system in many variants capable of sustaining inverted flight indefinitely, a swept wing configuration that gave it handling characteristics no standard trainer could replicate. Only 35 were manufactured before the German invasion of Belgium in 1940 forced the factory to close. After the war, the French company Sancan produced hundreds of SV4C variants for the French Air Force and civilian flying clubs, which is where most surviving examples originated. Robertson owned one. He used it on film productions. A Stampe SV4C painted for a Cliff Robertson film project appeared at Weston in Ireland in 1969. FAA registry records link SV4B airframes under the registrations N180SV and N25SV to his collection. For Robertson, the SV4 was not a display piece. It was a tool, a machine that forced the pilot to engage with the absolute edges of low-speed aerodynamic behavior. And for a man whose entire aviation philosophy was built on the principle that foundational skills cannot be bypassed, that was exactly the point. But the next aircraft on this list belongs to a completely different aerodynamic world and to a completely different war. At number 5, the aircraft designed by Willy Messerschmitt in the 1930s that the Luftwaffe used as a high-speed liaison transport, and the reason Robertson's version is not quite what it appears. The Messerschmitt BF108 Typhoon is, by any standard, a remarkable piece of aeronautical engineering for its era. Designed in 1934, all-metal monocoque fuselage, retractable landing gear, leading-edge slats, a clean, aerodynamically modern profile that was years ahead of most contemporary aircraft. It was not designed as a fighter. It was designed as a high-performance touring aircraft. But the aerodynamic lessons learned in its construction directly shaped the design of the Buff 109, the Luftwaffe's primary fighter for the entire war. The two aircraft share the same DNA. The BF108 influenced the wing geometry, the slat design, and the control philosophy of the aircraft that fought over Britain, over Malta, over Stalingrad, and over Normandy. During the war, the BF108 was used extensively by the Luftwaffe as a high-speed personnel transport and liaison aircraft. After the war, French company SN continued manufacturing the design at captured German facilities, replacing the original Argus engines with French Renault engines. These post-war French-built aircraft are known as the Nord 1002 Penguin C. Robertson's aircraft, which he described as a Messerschmitt, was almost certainly one of these Nord 1002 variants. The distinction matters to historians. It does not diminish the aircraft. A Hollywood actor who won the Academy Award owned and operated a machine designed by Willie Messerschmitt because he respected what Messerschmitt had built, regardless of which flag it flew under. The BF108 eventually ended up on display at the Parker O'Malley Air Museum in Ghent, New York. A separate account suggests a Robertson-owned BF108 was destroyed in a hangar fire at Ansonia Airport in Connecticut. The most likely explanation is that there were two separate airframes at different points. That is the kind of thing that happens when a man owns enough aircraft across enough decades. You lose count. We are 2 entries in, and we have not touched the aircraft that the Museum of Flight in Seattle built an entire wing around. We have not touched the night flights into a blockaded African war zone under anti-aircraft fire. And we have not touched number 1, which is going to completely change what you thought you knew about this man. Stay with us. Keep watching, because the aircraft at number 2 on this list involved real anti-aircraft fire over Africa, and the aircraft at number 1 is the reason the entire aviation community still talks about Cliff Robertson by name, decades after his death. At number 4, the aircraft with no engine that he flew to 26,000 feet and used to set a state record that still stands. Robertson did not distinguish between powered and unpowered flight as different disciplines. He understood them as 2 manifestations of the same fundamental pursuit. And when he pursued soaring, he pursued it the way he pursued everything else, to its absolute limit. He owned a Grob Twin A, a high-performance 2-seat fiberglass sailplane manufactured in Germany. The Twin A is renowned for its exceptional glide ratio and laminar flow wings. Laminar flow aerodynamics reduce friction drag by maintaining smooth, attached airflow across the wing surface for as long as possible before it transitions to turbulent flow. The result is an aircraft that can cover significantly more horizontal distance for every foot of altitude lost than a conventional design. Robertson based his soaring operations at High Country Soaring in Minden, Nevada. Minden sits at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The Sierras generate some of the most powerful mountain wave lift on Earth, where air that has been forced up over the peaks continues to rise in massive, invisible columns extending far into the stratosphere. Robertson used that lift. He earned the FAI Diamond altitude rating, which requires an unpowered altitude gain in excess of 5,000 meters above the release point. He did not gain 5,000 meters. He gained significantly more. He flew his glider to an altitude exceeding 26,000 feet. 26,000 feet in an aircraft with no engine over the Sierra Nevada. He also flew a 2-place cross-country distance record for the state of Nevada, 240 miles from Tonopah, Nevada to Parowan, Utah. No engine, no motor, nothing but atmospheric physics, a laminar flow wing, and a pilot who understood how to read the invisible structure of the air well enough to cover 240 miles on it. He held a glider rating alongside his single-engine, multi-engine, instrument, commercial, balloon, and sea ratings. He did not collect ratings for the sake of them. He collected them because each one opened a different relationship with flight, and he wanted all of them. At number 3, the aircraft so ordinary that most pilots never look twice at it, and the regulatory bombshell that means the FAA issued airworthiness directives naming Cliff Robertson as the legal manufacturer. The de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moth is a fabric-covered tailwheel biplane that the Royal Air Force used to teach pilots how to fly during the Second World War. It is powered by a de Havilland Gipsy Major engine producing 130 horsepower, maximum speed around 109 miles per hour, no brakes on many variants, no flaps, nothing automated, just the stick, the rudder, and the throttle, and a pilot who either understands what those inputs are doing to the airflow or learns very quickly. Robertson soloed in a Tiger Moth at the Fire Oaks Flying Club in Chobham, Surrey, under the instruction of Wing Commander Arthur, a veteran pilot of both World Wars who was still instructing in his 70s. Robertson's logic for starting in the Tiger Moth was deliberate. He believed that mastering a low-horsepower tailwheel biplane with no brakes in a crosswind would instill the fundamental stick and rudder skills necessary to fly any aircraft safely. That philosophy informed every subsequent aircraft in his collection. Over his lifetime, he owned as many as 3 Tiger Moths concurrently. One specific airframe, serial number 82960, built in 1940, served in the RAF until 1947. Robertson acquired it in 1963, shipped it to the United States, funded a ground-up restoration, and registered it as N523R. He sold it to a corporate pilot in 1987 who spent another 9 years restoring it. Now drop the word Biafra in the comments right now if you have made it this far. Just that word. It tells us you are still watching, and it helps this channel more than you know. Because what most people never discovered about Robertson's Tiger Moths is what he did with them legally. When the original de Havilland Company and its licensees ceased to maintain US type certificate responsibilities for these vintage aircraft, the legal responsibility for their continued airworthiness in the United States had to go somewhere. It went to Cliff Robertson. Official Federal Register documents confirm that Type Certificate Datasheet A8EU, which covers all de Havilland DH-82A aircraft built in the United Kingdom, was legally held by Cliff Robertson, care of Gadboy Business Management. This was not an honorary title. This was not a symbolic gesture. By holding that type certificate, Robertson assumed the legal role of manufacturer for regulatory compliance purposes within the United States. When an Australian accident investigation found that in-flight wing failures were being caused by fractured lateral fuselage tie rods, the FAA did not issue an airworthiness directive to de Havilland. De Havilland no longer existed for these purposes. The FAA issued an airworthiness directive to Cliff Robertson, officially designating the affected aircraft as Cliff Robertson de Havilland Model DH-82A airplanes. The directive required immediate inspection and potential replacement of the tie rods across every Tiger Moth registered in the United States. Without Robertson holding that certificate, those aircraft could not legally fly. He took the regulatory burden onto himself so that other people's aircraft could remain in the air. He did not have to do that. He was an actor. Nobody required this of him. He did it because he understood that the survival of these aircraft required someone to step into the gap, and he was the one positioned to do it. At number 2, the aircraft that should not have been able to fly into a war zone, and the man who made it happen anyway. From 1967 to 1970, the Nigerian Civil War produced one of the most catastrophic famines of the 20th century. The secessionist state of Biafra was militarily blockaded by the Nigerian federal government. Starvation was not a side effect of the conflict, it was a deliberate weapon. Children were dying at a rate that international observers described as genocide by hunger. Conventional government relief channels were paralyzed by geopolitical complexity. The blockade was legally enforced. Officially, nothing could get in. Unofficially, a coalition of non-governmental organizations operating under the banner of Joint Church Aid began an airlift. Night flights only. No lights on the aircraft. No lights on the airstrips. Into Yuli, a makeshift airstrip carved out of the jungle, under the constant threat of Nigerian anti-aircraft fire. The aircraft they used were Boeing C-97G Stratofreighters, 4-engine cargo planes developed from the B-29 Superfortress. Sustaining the minimum required daily supply needed approximately 15 C-97 flights per day. Cost $60,000 daily. The money had to come from somewhere. Robertson organized it. He led fundraising drives alongside the Young Democrats, the Young Republicans, and Junior Chambers of Commerce chapters across the country. He leveraged his platform as a famous actor to conduct what he called a suffering stranger appeal. He did not just write a check. He organized the logistics. He was part of the chain that kept those aircraft flying into that jungle strip in the dark. His direct logistical work on the Biafran airlift earned him the L.P. Sharples Award from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, given annually to a private citizen for the greatest selfless contribution to general aviation. Nearly a decade later, he replicated the same logistical operation for Ethiopia during the famine of 1978. 2 wars, 2 airlifts, the same method, the same man. Now, number 1. And here is what you need to know before we get there. The aircraft at number 1 flew on D-Day. It was purchased by Robertson in 1963. It was flown by a single pilot for 52.5 years, the longest recorded Spitfire flying tenure in history. And Robertson was flying a different aircraft in his fleet on the morning of September 11, 2001, when he became the only private pilot in the air directly above the World Trade Center. At the moment the first plane hit, he watched the North Tower start to burn from 7,500 feet. He did not know what he was looking at. He reported smoke to air traffic control. Then the nationwide ground stop hit. Every aircraft in American airspace ordered down immediately. He landed at the nearest airport and watched the same news as everyone else. He died on September 10th, 2011, one day before the 10th anniversary of what he had seen from above. That is not the number one aircraft, but it is the context, because the number one aircraft on this list is the reason he is still talked about in the warbird community. It is the reason the Museum of Flight in Seattle has a dedicated place for it in the Personal Courage Wing, and it is the reason that the name Cliff Robertson means something entirely different to a Spitfire pilot than it does to a film historian. At number 1, the D-Day Combat Veteran, the longest flown Spitfire in history. The aircraft that served in 3 air forces, appeared in a major war film, and was owned by a Hollywood actor for 33 years. Military serial Mk923. Supermarine Spitfire low-altitude fighter Mark 9E, built in early 1944 at the Vickers Armstrongs facility at Castle Bromwich, England. The low-altitude fighter designation is significant. The standard Spitfire was optimized for interception at altitude. The LF variant had its supercharger cropped and retuned to deliver maximum power at lower altitudes. In 1944, the air war over Europe had shifted. The priority was no longer pure high-altitude interception. It was supporting ground forces, escorting medium bombers, and establishing air superiority at the altitudes where the tactical battle was being decided. Mk923 was built for that world. The E-wing variant it carried housed 2 Hispano 20mm cannons and 4.50 caliber Browning heavy machine guns. That armament package represented a massive increase in concentrated firepower over earlier Spitfire variants. The aircraft was allocated to No. 126 Squadron of the Royal Air Force. On June 6, 1944, Mk923 flew over the English Channel as part of the Allied air umbrella covering the Normandy landings. D-Day, the largest amphibious assault in the history of warfare. This specific aircraft was in the air that day. After the war, it served with the Royal Netherlands Air Force, then the Belgian Air Force. Then it was demilitarized and placed on the Belgian Civil Register as OARF. In 1961, it appeared in the war film The Longest Day. The film used authentic surplus aircraft because they were available and because no CGI existed. The film money kept the aircraft out of the smelter. Robertson watched what was happening to these airframes. He understood that the window for acquiring a D-Day combat veteran Spitfire was closing. He bought OARF in 1963. He was not the only American Spitfire owner at the time. There was one other. 2 airworthy Spitfires in private civilian hands in the entire United States. Robertson had one of them. He knew he could not fly it the way it deserved to be flown. The Spitfire demands an understanding of high-torque tailwheel operations that takes years to develop. He enlisted Britain's premier aerobatic pilot, Neil Williams, former RAF test pilot, to ferry the aircraft. Williams flew it. Williams understood immediately why the aircraft mattered. In 1969, Robertson initiated a comprehensive restoration at DuPage County Airport in West Chicago, in partnership with William Ross, the only other known Spitfire owner in the United States. The original Merlin 66 engine could not be sourced. The global supply of functional Merlin 66 units had effectively disappeared. The aircraft was re-engined with a Rolls-Royce Merlin 76 producing 1,760 horsepower, mated to a 4-bladed Rotol propeller. Maximum speed, 404 miles per hour. For public airshow demonstrations, Robertson needed a display pilot with the specific experience to do the aircraft justice. William Ross recommended Jerry Billing, an ex-Royal Canadian Air Force Spitfire pilot based in Windsor, Ontario. From 1972 to 1994, Billing flew Mk923 at airshows across North America, including a solo routine at EAA Air Venture in Oshkosh in 1987 that was described by witnesses as one of the most extraordinary single-aircraft displays the show had ever seen. Billing flew Spitfires until he was 75 years old. His total Spitfire flying tenure, 52.5 years. The global record. No pilot in history has logged more time in a Spitfire than Jerry Billing, and the aircraft he flew for the majority of that tenure belonged to Cliff Robertson. In 1996, Robertson sold Mk923 to telecommunications entrepreneur Craig McCarr. He attended an aviation conference in Oregon while the sale concluded. The Apex Foundation eventually acquired the aircraft. It now resides on permanent loan in the Personal Courage Wing of the Museum of Flight in Seattle, Washington. A D-Day combat veteran, purchased from Belgian civil surplus by an Academy Award-winning actor who had the foresight to see what it was. Kept flying for 33 years under his ownership, demonstrated to millions of spectators by the pilot who holds the world record for Spitfire longevity. Now in a museum named for the courage it took to fly aircraft like this, when the consequences of getting it wrong were not a bent propeller. They were the loss of the aircraft, the loss of the pilot, and one fewer piece of the war in the sky over Normandy, left in the world. Robertson received the EAA's highest honor, the Freedom of Flight Award, in 1987. He was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 2006. The National Aeronautic Association named him Elder Statesman of Aviation in 2007. He founded the EAA Young Eagles program as its first honorary chairman in 1992. Which flew over 1 million children before he passed the role to General Chuck Yeager. He established the Cliff Robertson Work Experience Program, which brought 16-year-olds to Oshkosh for 12 weeks of manual labor in exchange for ground school and flight instruction, because he remembered being 14 years old cleaning engine parts at Spear Airport in San Diego in exchange for 15 minutes in a Piper Cub. He did not forget where he started. He built a program so that other people could start the same way. An actor, a humanitarian airlift organizer, a glider pilot with a diamond altitude rating, a man who held the FAA type certificate for an entire aircraft type so that other people's aircraft could stay legal, the man who was above the World Trade Center when the world changed, and the custodian of the D-Day Spitfire that now sits in Seattle, waiting for people to stand in front of it and understand what it was. That is Cliff Robertson. Tell us in the comments which aircraft from this collection you would most want to see fly in person. And if you are here for aviation history told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe.